Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Well, as a girl dad, I never envisioned a day where biological girls would be forced to compete against biological boys. And for that matter, I never really thought I'd ever have to qualify boy or girl with the term biological. But what we're witnessing today is an all-out assault on girls and women. People refuse to define what a woman is. They refuse to admit that biological males have a distinct physiological advantage over females. They insist on allowing males to compete against females in every single sport and to share the same locker room, the same changing areas, and they insist on demonizing and silencing anyone who protests or speaks out. Thankfully, our guest today is growing a powerful movement to elevate and empower female athletes. Her name is MARSHI Smith, and she is the co-founder of ICONS, the Independent Council on Women's Sports. MARSHI, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad we made this happen. You know, before we started recording, I said, I think this is probably one of the most, if not the most important topic with respect to our cultural battle right now going on in America. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely would. And the reason is because if we break down the fundamental truth of even male and female and what is scientifically measurable,
right,
we do not have any foundation to make any claims at all. And so the sports topic is tied into this and kind of a very apparent and visible thing for people to grasp on a consistent daily basis.
Yeah.
But the root of it is really this attack on the truth of what is reality.
Yeah, it is an attack on the truth, isn't it? I mean, at its most basic level, right? And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about Title IX later in the show, and there's some very specific things there. But one of the things I was intrigued by, you talk about how opportunities and protection for women and girls in sports has dramatically eroded, right? I mean, we're seeing it in real time, and that we need a voice to defend the respect for and fair treatment of our next generation of female athletes. Tell us about the catalyst for why you co-founded ICONS.
Well, I was just a stay-at-home mom. I won't say just. I was a stay-at-home mom raising a couple toddlers when Leah Thomas won a national championship title in the NCAA. I was fortunate enough in my collegiate swim career to also win an NCAA title in the 100 backstroke.
All right.
And so I had the very specific and unique experience in my life to stand on that same platform and podium and receive that award. I know what it meant to me, and to watch 2 years ago, the NCAA triumph and award a male athlete in the position I once stood was devastating to me because I know what that second place girl must have felt like watching this transpire. Not just her, but everyone on the pool deck that day must have been just absolutely crushed. And to see the media and public to be outraged and yet allow it to happen, and for the NCAA leadership to allow this to happen, I was so confused. I was feeling so helpless, and I wanted to help to do something to correct this terrible mistake. And what I sadly found was, after a group of teammates from the University of Arizona asked me to write a collaborative letter on behalf of our alumni and deliver it to the NCAA, we got 45 or so signatures from some of the top collegiate swimmers of all time. And we were ignored to this day. We've never received a response. And so what I found that was so heartbreaking is that the female athlete voice had been silenced organizations that were supposed to be working on behalf of female athletes, like the most prominent Women's Sports Foundation, had actually abandoned us to fight against us for men and boys to infiltrate women's sports. I was connected through Riley Gaines to the parent of an Ivy League swimmer, Kim Jones. And together we decided we needed to launch an organization, a network, to be able to platform the female athlete voice, because we weren't having a seat at the decision-making tables that were determining the rules of our own sports categories.
Wow.
And so men and boys who identified in various ways were invited to write the policy for women, but women were not allowed. And so that's why we needed a group to advocate for women.
Wow, it's inspiring to me. And what's interesting to me, of course, is that you had very personal experience in competitive athletics in that particular sport. And so when it came up, that must have been, shocking. I mean, the rest of the world, all of us are watching. I have a daughter who is a junior in college. She's been a competitive athlete her whole life. I wrote an article for the Christian Post about this when that catastrophe happened in the pool, so to speak. And I remember thinking to myself, what would I do today as a father of a competitive female athlete if I saw a male competitor on that field, which, by the way, is unsafe? Oftentimes, you're not protecting the safety of your young female athletes. You're not protecting the fairness of competition, and you're destroying opportunity. Your mission is to elevate and empower female athletes. Tell us a little bit about that. You're talking about the next generation, right? We're not talking about the right now generation necessarily. We are, but we're really fighting a bigger fight for those that are going to come behind. Tell us about that.
This is a really crucial moment right now in determining if we as a society, as Americans, are going to allow this to continue. It's kind of the precipice of, are we going to unravel and reverse all of the incredible movement forward for women and girls, not only in sports, but in society, and tell girls your rights and your safety, your privacy, your dignity don't matter anymore? Is this the message that we're going to send to your daughter and to my 7-year-old daughter growing up to live in a world like this in American society? Or are adults going to take a stand? Are we going to speak freely and side with common sense and decency and tell little girls that they deserve fair competition, respect, and equal treatment to that of men and boys?
Yes. And in some ways, it really is disturbing, right? And because we are erasing women. We are in the middle of a giant erasure of women and girls in our culture right now. Men are dominating just about everything, not just sports, but other categories, other complete categories, including job categories, which is completely disturbing. Let's talk a little bit about the truth, as you started this conversation, the truth about the biology, right? The issue of biological men competing against biological women. Let's talk about some of those scientific differences, right? Because on your website, you're really super clear on this issue. You lay out the science on your website. Let's talk a little bit about some of those advantages that they have.
Well, there's a little confusion around this puberty marker. So even international sports bodies are using the age of 12. Like, for example, FINA, World Aquatics, World Cycling, World Athletics, which is track and field. They are kind of fixating on this puberty metric of if boys have transitioned prior to the age of 12. And by transition, I only mean medicalize. If they have not surpassed that benchmark of at 12, somehow they are equivalent to be able to compete against women and girls in the future, even at the highest levels. This is a mistake, but in general, most people understand common sense that men and women perform differently in athletics. There are literally thousands of metrics where that difference can be explained scientifically.
Wow.
So one of the things that I have learned on this just a little over a year and a half in this journey of doing this every day, talking about it, researching it, talking to scientists and attorneys and athletes about this is that, you know, in the beginning, we, on the side of common sense, like to argue till we're blue in the face about all the science. And what we were losing is the emotion of what girls and women are going through today, because they can't argue with the science. Everyone understands the larger heart, the larger lungs, bigger hands in swimming, the longer wingspan, you know, upper body strength. These are all things that we understand. And what we need to now shift our focus when we're talking to the average person, or when we're testifying for these sports bills across the country, or talking to our school board, is, of course, talk about science, but also the emotional and psychological impacts of girls and women today. Even watching this, not only experiencing it, but for me, I only watched this transpire, and my whole life has changed from that moment because of how devastating that was to me. So, articulating that and talking about the feelings behind the messaging that we're telling half of our society today is really a crucial step to ultimately correcting this in as short a period of time as we can.
Well, okay. So that in some ways is super encouraging that you're focusing on that. And in some ways it's maddening, because we have to now talk about the emotional trauma and toll that it's taking on girls and women in order to get people to just exercise common sense. It is absolute nonsense. We live in the world of make believe, and we're being forced to believe these lies. And then we have to make an argument. We have to get creative in how we make our arguments so that we can win the argument. It's just a stunning development to me. It's maddening, right? Just as a person of logic. And then I think about, you mentioned on the website that science and biology is clear. You know, I mean, in fact, you have a quote from Dr. Ross Tucker, who's a PhD, who said, biological sex is the single most important determinant of athletic performance that is known. And that is echoed by just about every physician who is honest about the science. But what I love now, and I've seen a pivot even with Riley Gaines, who I know you know well. And, you know, I've seen a pivot from the science of it, which is obvious. It's undeniable. Someone like Leah Thomas, who was the 462nd ranked swimmer on the men's side, goes to the number one ranking on the women's overnight. So it's obvious, right? But I love what Riley's doing. I think she's talking more now about the emotional toll. Is that part of her strategy as well?
I think so. You know, we have all come a long way in this fight. And Riley and I connected very soon after the meet, because she started speaking out publicly after that race, obviously. And that was about the same time that I had released our University of Arizona letter. So I was also being asked on the news suddenly to be a spokesperson for our team and for swimmers, watching what was unfolding. And so what I will say is that every day, all of us are learning more and more, becoming more comfortable in speaking about this, in understanding what resonates better or worse, where we're losing, where we're gaining. And so I would say week to week, all of us are just kind of honing the message and understanding. That's one of the reasons that I share kind of this evolution of how we generally were trying to hound the science, because we believe if we can prove the science, how could anyone deny that?
Right.
But we are being beaten by an emotional plea of 100% feelings, where opposition is not even really bringing up the science because they know better than that.
Right.
They want to say, despite the advantage, we need to platform boys and men above women because of their feelings. And so that seems to have taken a hold on some of the leadership making rules and laws. But it will come to an end once girls are able to speak about their feelings freely. Yes. So we are encouraging more and more girls across all these sports to share their stories publicly, either through us and our social media and media contacts, or directly to media, writing articles or holding press conferences to be able to share these emotional stories that they are going through.
I love that. It's interesting too, because we do live in an era, it's kind of an emotional era, right? Where emotion trumps all facts. It trumps everything. So someone's felt experience is more valid than the truth and the facts. So I think you're wise in pivoting in this way. I remember early on hearing that some of Leah Thomas's teammates expressed concern to the university, and they were silenced. They were actually threatened. I'm sure that you know more about the behind the scenes stuff there, and I think more of that is public. Tell us a little bit about that, right? Because there is this chilling fear factor that we're seeing, right? People are afraid to say things because they think they're going to lose opportunities. Tell us about that.
Yeah, in some cases, like in the Ivy League, Paula Scanlon is one of those athletes who was speaking out anonymously in the beginning, a teammate of Leah Thomas. They were very kind of blatant and egregious in what they were telling the female athletes. You're not going to get a job. You are going to be ostracized in society. You may be kicked off the team because you're harassing a female athlete. Like, these are very blatant attempts to silence the girls. And we are seeing that across the country in various states and locations, but it's also a little bit nuanced, even among schools and teams that agree with the girls. So, coaches might say, well, I agree with you, but don't say anything political. Let's just stay out of politics, just for your benefit. I don't want anything to happen to you. And that subtle quieting is enough to stop a girl from standing up for herself.
Wow.
And so we're getting things all over the spectrum. And I would just say that we need to just burst through that door. Yes. If you're a female athlete or a parent in that position where your leadership is too cowardly to speak up for your daughters themselves, don't be afraid. Now you have many advocates who are willing to platform you and support you in any way, whether it be anonymously or very publicly. There are all avenues to be able to share your story now. So just do not be silent.
Yeah. And I have to believe that there are way more people that believe what we believe, believe in facts and science, and also believe in just basic fairness and common sense. There is no question. There is something, I hate to say this, but there's some kind of a woke mind virus that has overtaken leadership in just about every aspect of our culture. And none of the rest of us believe this is okay, but somehow they're very effective at silencing us. So I love the fact that you're giving people a voice, you're giving them that outlet and that platform. We're looking at this now across all sports. Like, at first I thought, well, this is a handful of sports, but now it's essentially every sport is having this influx of biological males competing against females. I saw a bunch of stuff on your social media recently about the, I believe it was field hockey, the injury that just happened to one of the female competitors when one of the biological male competitors who has more strength, that she got hurt. I saw a post on that. Tell us about field hockey. Tell us about martial arts. I know martial arts competitions now are going bonkers in unfair competition. Talk about those in particular.
Well, in the martial arts arena, we know of 5 or 6 men who have been competing against women in a combat sport,
right?
Unknowingly for the women. So the problem is that women are asked to blindly accept increased risk of danger, and in some ways mortal danger, unbeknownst to them. And that is absolutely terrifying and wrong.
Yes.
It's dangerous for parents to allow their girls to compete in competitions like that. And this, again, is for what? To protect the feelings of a man or a boy? Right. The risk far outweighs this really madness that we're seeing. Right. And in field hockey and high school field hockey, I don't know if you've ever held a field hockey ball, but just thinking about getting hit in the face with one is it. I literally have goosebumps right now. I can't imagine that the fact that her teeth were knocked out, she may be lucky, because a head trauma injury from a ball like that could kill somebody.
Yes.
And I'm not sure the details at this point, whether she and her teammates knew that this was a boy on the team, but I'm sure her parents didn't know she was going to a game to potentially get whacked by an incredibly hard ball in the face.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right. We're seeing concussions in volleyball because a women's volleyball net is 7 inches shorter than a boys' volleyball net in high school. And so the difference in power and velocity on a volleyball into your head is enormous. And so we're beyond the fairness argument at this point. Wow. We understand in swimming it's not fair, but when you start seeing this in sports, that is it going to take a girl to die in order for policymakers and lawmakers to do the right thing? Like I'm not sure, but I would hope that most common sense, reasonable and ethical people out there agree with us.
Yes.
It's a matter of doing the right thing now. You have to do it. You have to be allowed in your meetings. You have to demand it at this point, because we're going to see worse injuries than this moving forward.
No question. You talked about the volleyball. I've seen injuries online. I've seen it happen. Those concussions, which do cause debilitating injury, and that hangs on, and it can hang on for months and months. It can be permanent depending upon the severity of that injury. You talk about field hockey and the ball. My daughter played lacrosse, and I cannot even imagine, even for 1 second, allowing a boy or a man on a lacrosse field playing against female athletes, because that is flat dangerous. Someone could die. No question about it. Someone could die in that circumstance. I hope it's not going to take that, but I don't even know that a death would change it. That's the problem, right? So we are so crazy with this ideology right now that it makes me wonder if even that would stop it. And that's why, to your point, we've got to talk. We've got to stand up now. We've got to be super loud about this. We will get to that at the end of the program, because I want you to leave our listeners, who, by the way, are parents of boys and girls, who are coaches, who have athletes in their family. There's a lot of listeners right now that want to know, what am I going to do about it? So we'll end there, but let's talk. We got a bunch of other things to talk about in the meantime. Let's talk a little bit. I love how you just said we've moved from unfair to unsafe. I think that's a massive pivot. I've seen a lot of stuff in the combat sports One of the things I did see, which I was really encouraged about, was where the boy was competing in martial arts, of course, won, where everybody went bonkers, where we exposed the league or the organization that put on the event, and then almost immediately they came out and changed their policies going forward. Is that what it's going to take?
Unfortunately, it is going to take public shaming and humiliation targeted at specific organizations or people, because I can't tell you how many jiu-jitsu female competitors I spoke to that said, I wrote my federation emails. I called them. I told them I'm backing out. They've self-excluded. A lot of people ask for boycotts. They demand women to boycott. I'm telling you that women have retired from the sport. They don't show up. They don't sign up. They forfeit the match before they step on the mat. These are all things that have happened, are happening right now. Wow. You just don't hear about it because it's not on a Daily Mail article or on Fox News, but this is happening every day. And the beauty of creating a network like we have and just building an audience of support and social media followers is that we are able to expose these federations that are discriminating against their female athletes and not push to the point where they're going to make a change. And we can expose and create awareness when they fail their athletes. And in this case, there was a tournament in Georgia, a NAGA tournament, that 2 men, so more men than women, signed up for 4 women's divisions in this competition. And women self-excluded, they forfeited. These 2 men were left to stand on the women's podium alone, one with a big trans flag and the other with 3 medals and a belt, all women's awards.
Unreal.
And really mock the women in the competition. And that photo is now going to go down in history as probably the most egregious and grossest women's sports podium ever. Surpassing Leah Thomas. And that's what it took for NAGA to, within 24 hours of the story breaking on Redux, change their policy to ban men in the sport of women's jiu-jitsu, and then to follow the ADCC, which is the Super Bowl or Olympics of no-gi grappling, also followed and has banned men from now on. So, it's tragic that we're having to see with our own eyes the damage and the suffering and awards being lost and opportunities being lost, records being broken. People have to see it first. But, it's kind of like guerrilla warfare for all these sports now to try and get them to do the right thing. And sometimes we just have to force them.
Yeah, I love it. I love the fact that it became public. And that's the only reason anything changed, right? Because it's a public embarrassment. You should be embarrassed that you allowed men to be on the female podium. That's ridiculous. And I do believe that in this public. Well, thanks for tuning in to part 1 of a 2-part series with MARSHI Smith, the co-founder of the Independent Council on Women's Sports, otherwise known as iconswomen.com. Stay tuned for part 2 and all of the ways that you can get involved to defend the fair and safe competition for females and women in sports. See you next time.